Over the last few weeks, one of the biggest names in competitive Dead by Daylight has been at the center of a controversy involving former leadership, serious allegation, contracts, money, and community trust. And if you do not follow competitive DBD, that probably already sounds like a lot. So this video is going to start from zero. What is competitive DBD? What is DBDLeague and why did it matter? Who were the people involved? Who is Mathis and what did he allege? Who is James and what happened to him? What did DBDLeague say in response? What did James say after that? And most importantly, where does competitive DBD go from here? Because this is not just about who made a better Google Doc, it is about how we got here, why DBDLeague mattered in the first place, and what happens for the next competitive scene. When a community organization becomes big enough to ask for trust, money, time, and legitimacy, the answer it gives during a crisis matter. And this is where the story begins. Before we talk about DBDLeague, we need to talk about competitive Dead by Daylight. Because for most people, DBD is public matches. Solo queues, surviving with friends, tunneling, camping, looping, strong builds, bad teammates, funny moments, and whatever chaos happens when 4 survivors and 1 killer load into a match. Competitive DBD is different. Players are not just queuing randomly, they play in teams. They practice together, they scrim, they prepare builds, they study maps, they learn matchups, they play around points, timers, hook, held states, gens, and specific rule sets. Those rule sets matter because Dead by Daylight was not built like a normal esport. The game has random maps, random tiles, perks, item add-ons offering killer powers, survivor spawns, and a lot of variables that can be hard to balance in a tournament setting. So competitive DBD usually adds structure. Some perks may be restricted, some killers may be limited, some maps may be controlled, teams play both sides. Matches are scored through a point system instead of simply asking, did everyone escape? You do not know every rule to understand this video. The important thing is this. Competitive DBD is a much smaller world inside a much bigger Dead by Daylight community. Most normal DBD players know the game, far fewer know the comp scene. And even fewer know the history, the teams, the staff, the tournament organizers, and the people who have been running things behind the scene for years. This is where this story can be confusing from the outside. Because once the controversy starts, names come fast. Direwolf, Savannah, Darlock, Mathis, James, V1, DBDLeague, Behavior, Season 10, land contracts, prize pools. Before we get into the allegations, I want the foundation to be clear. This is not just random drama between DBD players. This is about one of the main organizations that try to make competitive Dead by Daylight feel bigger, more serious, and more official. And for a while, DBDLeague looked like it might actually do that. And so there's not much that I know about the comp scene, but I see it, and I think a lot of people see it as a bit of a bubble. And once you're inside it, it seems like everybody knows each other and there's so much going on. But from the exterior, it seems like this perfectly oiled machine.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's been a thing for very long. I almost want to say it's a thing of the past, where the competitive community used to be this, as you said, this really small bubble of grifters that just really played for the ego mostly to show, oh yeah, I'm really good at the game. Also, I play competitive DBD, which means I'm better than you. That used to be a big issue in 2018 to, I want to say, into early 2023. That's when it started sort of mixing with the broader community again. When it became more mainstream, when people started accepting it more, especially when DBDLeague started pulling in larger numbers, and also with the, obviously the Season 10 tournament with the 20,000, which was a big
prize pool.
Was a big success.
That is the world DBDLeague existed in. A small competitive scene trying to become more watchable, more organized, and more legitimate. This is why DBDLeague mattered, not because it was perfect, but because for a lot of people it looked like one of the few organizations that could actually push competitive DBD forward. So what was DBDLeague? The simple version is this. DBDLeague was one of the biggest competitive Dead by Daylight tournament organizers. It ran seasons, it organized teams, it had staff, casters, match officials, production team, it had prize pools, it had broadcasts that people actually watched. And inside CompDBD, that matters. Because if you are a competitive player, a tournament organizer is not just a Twitch channel or a Discord server, it's the structure you compete in. It decides the format, the rules, it manages the matches, it handles scheduling, it communicates with players, it handles the prize pools, it gives the scene a stage. And for a while, DBDLeague was one of the biggest stages CompDBD had. From the outside, it may have looked like a polished community tournament, but behind the scenes, it was still mostly run by volunteers and community members, trying to grow into something more official. That distinction matters, because the bigger DBDLeague got, the more trust it asked from the community. To follow the rest of the story, you need to know the people involved. First, there's Direwolf. Direwolf was one of the central leadership figures in DBDLeague. In Mathis's video, Direwolf became one of the most influential people in the organization and eventually assumed the primary leadership role after previous leadership stepped away. A lot of the original controversy centers around Direwolf, allegations about his conduct, his role in leadership, and his involvement in the organization's internal decisions. And there is Savannah. Savannah was also part of the DBDLeague leaderships and appears throughout the story as someone closely tied to Direwolf and the internal running of the organization. DBDLeague later addressed the both figures in its public response, which we'll come back to later in the video. Then there is DBDLeague. DBDLeague matters because he became the owner and operative figure for DBDLeague's LLC. That means when DBDLeague became more official as a business, DBDLeague became one of the most important people in the story. And then there is Mathis. Mathis is the person who released the original video, The Crimes of DBDLeague. But it was not just some random person watching from the outline. Mathis had been a player, captain, caster, editor, production director, event host, manager, and key staff member in DBDLeague. So when he speaks about DBDLeague, he is speaking as someone with years of history inside the scene. And then there is James, also known as Peppers. James is the investor at the center of the contract and money dispute. According to James and the final statement, he invested $13,000 into DBDLeague and joined as a strategy manager to help the organization grow. DBDLeague disputes important parts of that story. And finally, there is V1. V1 is a creator, a commentator who covered the controversy and later interviewed James publicly. V1 is not the judge of the entire situation, but he streams matters because James answers questions live instead of only relying on written statements. Those are the main names, but the most group is bigger than all of them. It's the players, the staff, the artists, the casters, the match officials, the viewers, the people who donated, the people who wanted the LAN to happen, the people who believed CompDBD could become something more. That is who this controversy affects, not just people named in the document, the whole community around the organization. That is important because Mathis's video was not just an outside reaction. It came from someone who helped build parts of what DBDLeague became. And that is also why the controversy became so serious so quickly. To understand why this controversy became such a big deal, it helps to look at where DBDLeague stood before any of these allegations became public. By the time Season 10 arrived, DBDLeague had built a reputation as one of the central pillars of competitive Dead by Daylight. It was where many of the best teams played, it was where major matches were broadcast, and for a lot of viewers it had become the default place to follow the competitive scene. Season 10 reinforced that position. The prize pool was one of the largest the scene had ever seen, the broadcast looked more polished, the competition felt more organized, and the overall presentation gave the impression that CompDBD was moving forward. Whether that perception was completely accurate or not, it mattered, because people were investing more than just their time. Players were investing practice hours, staff were investing volunteer work. Artists, casters, moderators, and production members were helping build something they believed could grow. The organization had become more than a tournament bracket. It had become a symbol of where many people hoped competitive DBD was heading. This is why the fallout extends beyond the individuals involved. When a small community project becomes one of the most visible organizations in a scene, expectations changed. Questions about leadership, finance, decision-making, and community safety stop being internal issues. They become issues that affect everyone who has placed their trust in the organization. And that is ultimately why this story matters. Not because DBDLeague was the only tournament organizer, but because it had reached a point where many people saw it as one of the main faces of competitive Dead by Daylight itself. The controversy did not start with James's contract. It started with allegations around former DBDLeague's leadership, especially Direwolf and Savannah. I want to be respectful here. I am not going to name the younger community member involved, and I'm not going to put more attention on them than necessary. The important point is that allegations surfaced involving inappropriate conduct, power dynamics, and former leadership inside a community space where younger players and community members existed. Mathis' original video criticized DBDLeague's early response to that situation. His point was that DBDLeague's first announcement said Direwolf and Savannah had stepped down as commissioners, but it did not clearly say whether they had been removed, banned, or permanently separated from the organization. DBDLeague later said that their announcements were worded poorly and clarified that Direwolf and Savannah were banned and would not return. That clarification matters because it directly addresses one of the biggest criticisms of DBDLeague's initial response. But the fact that DBDLeague had to clarify it later is also part of the issue. Because when allegations involving leadership, power dynamics, and younger community members, the organization's first public response matters a lot. For many people, their concern was not only the allegations themselves. It was whether DBDLeague responded like an organization and understood the seriousness of the situation.
So, how did DBDLeague react? With the following announcement: the team acknowledges the situation involving a Google document and is actively working on solutions. They recognize the situation is shocking and difficult and thank the community for its patience. The organization is restructuring to reduce impact on operations and the competitive environment. Savannah and Direwolf have stepped down as commissioners of DBDLeague. Their responsibilities are being reassigned within the team. Season 11 will be delayed by at least 2 weeks due to the restructuring. The team commits to transparency and will continue sharing updates. The community and players remain the top priority. The owner, operator, DBDLeague, will personally oversee the transition and future operations. Leadership responsibilities had already begun shifting to the owner, but the process is still ongoing and will be communicated openly. This announcement is seriously concerning for 2 reasons. 1, nowhere does it say they were removed from the team. They voluntarily stepped down as commissioners while remaining on the team, and their responsibilities are reassigned within it. This leaves open the opportunity of them returning in the future.
That was the first major trust problem. DBDLeague eventually gave a clearer answer and said Direwolf and Savannah were banned. But by then, the community was already asking a bigger question. If DBDLeague wanted to move forward, how much had actually changed? And then the story moved into that part that became even more complicated. The money. Now we get to James, also known as Peppers. By this point, the controversy had expanded far beyond the original concerns about leadership. Now there was a second dispute, one involving contracts, money, business decisions, and competing accounts of what happened behind the scenes. According to Mathis and statements James later made publicly, James became involved with DBDLeague because he believed the organization had real potential. He invested $13,000 into a project and took on the role of strategy manager. The expectation was that he would help guide growth, provide business input, and contribute to DBDLeague's long-term development. The agreement also included revenue sharing terms. And for a while, that relationship appeared to work. Then it collapsed. DBDLeague argues that James failed to fulfill his responsibilities, did not meaningfully contribute to building the business, and even gave advice that could have created legal or tag problems, failed identity verification requirements, and later engaged in conduct that led to his removal. James rejects that characterization. His position is that he was brought in the organization openly, that the contract terms were created by DBDLeague's leadership, and that he actively contributed through planning, strategy discussions, sponsorship idea, product feedback, and meetings with staff. He also disputes DBDLeague's explanation regarding identity verification and argues that tensions escalated after he began asking questions about payouts and finances. At its core, this part of the controversy comes down to two very different interpretations of the same relationship. One side says James failed to deliver on what he promised. The other side says he was involved contributing and later pushed out when disagreements over money and transparency began to surface. Season 10 sits right in the middle of that disagreement. Supporters of James' version point to the growth of DBDLeague during that period, including its largest prize pool and increased visibility as evidence that his involvement mattered. DBDLeague disputes that conclusion and maintains that his role has been overstated. And that question becomes incredibly important, because if James was largely absent and failed to provide what he agreed to provide, DBDLeague's actions become easier to justify. But if he was participating in meetings, helping with planning, communicating with staff, and contributing to the organization's growth, then the reason given for his removal require much more closer scrutiny. I wanted to ask for your first-hand experience, and if you wanted to elaborate, how was it to meet James and work with him shortly for the small time you did?
So he originally, as he also pointed out, he originally reached out to a YouTube comment, which is also where I saw him, and that's where I redirected him to the DBDLeague email. So then he.
So you were the one. You were the one that spotted the message, and
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw the comment, and then I redirected. I was surprised that he couldn't find a business email, so I responded to his comment, and by the way, here it is. And I was really happy, and he did respond in December. I didn't see at that time, I didn't have access to the emails. I'm pretty sure they gave it back to me in February, March, somewhere there. But yeah, they had first contact in January, February. I'm pretty sure the first message came in December, but it doesn't matter. And then I'm not sure if this was February or March, but that is where, pretty sure at first the first mentioning was when Dyer added the staff team on the DBDLeague's management server and said, "Oh, guys, by the way, we have a guaranteed $10,000 prize pool, and we are getting someone new on the team. Stay tuned for more." And then, probably within a week, we were invited to this meeting to meet him, to get to meet James. That was conducted by Dyer and Savannah, I think. And we had this meeting with Darolok, me, V1, Rats, Toby, and then Dyer and Savannah. I hope I'm not missing anyone, but that's who I remember at least. And then one by one, we went to introduce ourselves. I could also go into detail on this, but I'm pretty sure it's not very. It's only funny. It's not very interesting, but it's funny.
I think that it paints a picture of somebody being brought, into the team and everybody being introduced to that person, which already makes it official, as in, hey, this is a new member of the team. And I'm guessing that their role was clarified, as in they were there to help grow the organization, and that was going to be their mission.
Yeah, so everybody talked about what tasks they exactly did at DBDLeague, and James got to meet everybody, and then within, I think my meeting with him was 2 days after that meeting, he went through every single person, every single member of staff, and had private calls with them to get to meet them personally, etc., and what they did exactly, and to work out how exactly he can help them.
That clip matters because it pushes back against the idea that James was some unknown outsider who barely had a role. At minimum, according to Mathis, James was introduced to staff, people knew he was joining, and he had calls to understand how he could help. That does not automatically prove James fulfilled every obligation, but it does make DBDLeague's argument that he did not meaningfully help something that needs stronger evidence. At this point, the dispute had moved past one document versus another. DBDLeague had given its version, James and Mathis side had given theirs. The next major turn came when James appeared live on V1 stream. He was no longer just responding to a written statement, he was willing to answer questions in real time about the contract, the money, and what actually happened behind the scenes.
I would ask that you go in with an open mind. I'm also not going to try. I'm going to try to ask critical questions. I'm going to try to give a neutral interview. I don't want to give a softball interview. And again, I will let you be the judge what you think happened here, because this is a complicated situation.
First major point James pushed back on was the contract itself.
Okay, then it seems like from like an outsider's perspective, that it seems like you got an extremely good deal, right? From what I wrote, from what I read, like 25% permanent revenue of Twitch donations and sponsorships in exchange for 13,000 USD. And I remember on my last stream when I talked about these conditions, or when people heard about these terms, I remember a lot of Twitch chatters saying things like, you know, scammer versus scammer, or etc. Like people suspecting that you must have finessed them or taken advantage of DBDLeague or misled them in some way to get these terms. How did this contract come to be?
I proposed the amount. Originally, it was going to be 10,000. It got bumped up to 13K USD. And Dyer wrote the contract.
Hmm.
I had like a little bit of input on it, of course, but Dyer wrote the contract on his own. He's the one that came up with the percentage amounts. I agreed to them.
That answer changes the framing, because one way to dismiss James would be to say he pushed a small community organization into a bad contract. But if DBDLeague's leadership wrote the agreement and accepted the terms at the time, then it becomes much harder to later frame those terms as something James secretly imposed on them. It does not mean the agreement was smart. It does not mean James was right about everything, but it does mean the bad contract argument cannot stand on its own, unless DBDLeague explains why those terms were accepted in the first place.
Okay, then they include in their document that you would have given advice that would have led to tax evasion and breaking federal laws.
As for any type of tax, what was it? I gave advice against that would lead to tax evasion. I operate out of Florida, and when we ended up setting up the LLC, everything was in California.
For the, you said you cut
the
out there. You
laws are
said
different.
California, right? Yeah.
Yes, California.
Mhm.
Tax laws are different in California. I made it very clear that it was not a good idea to set things up in California. The taxes are much higher, and tax laws are stricter,
Mhm.
and that I did not know them completely. Never worked out of California.
Same problem shows up with the tax and legal advice claim. DBDLeague says James gave advice that could have resulted in tax evasion or breaking federal law. That is a serious accusation, but where is the evidence for it? What exact advice did James give? Who received it? When was it given? And where is a screenshot, email, message, or document showing that this advice would have broken the law? Because without that, the audience is being asked to accept one of the strongest claims in DBDLeague's response without seeing any evidence behind it.
How exactly did you help? Because one of the big pillars, one of their big arguments was that you did not do anything to help them in any way in strategy. That's one of the big points in their argument for why they are totally in their rights to confiscate your 13K. So what exactly did you do in DBDLeague? How did you help them?
I did everything. When I first joined, I talked to the staff members, and I figured I was like, hey, so what do you think's the best thing going on right now? And what's your biggest problem with DBDL? I got answers from all the staff. Most staff said their biggest problem was the commissioners and how they were hard to approach, how they were afraid of them, and so on. So I tried to fix that immediately by having meetings with the commissioners and saying, you know, why is this a problem? Why are people having trouble talking to you? I provided a rather large document of things from my own past experience. I do have business experience in competitive gaming, and I tried to add things that other tournaments do in different games, different spaces, but that we could do here to help with production, to help with casting, to help with just the overall entertainment experience. And that was back in January before the contract was even officially signed.
This pretty much lines up with what Mathis described earlier. It does not prove every contribution was worth the contract, but it does push back against the idea that James was barely involved at all.
And she admitted that Dyer had a secret bank account. Her words. So we end that call, and I convinced Airlock to, okay, now you need to confront Dyer with me. And we did. It wasn't going anywhere. And so eventually I just came out and said, what about your secret bank account, Dyer? He was like, what? And I kept pushing it on him. And eventually he was like, oh yeah, that bank account. It's just like, oh, well, I just had my friend sending me money. I just had it set up this way. It's no big deal. And that's how the call ended. Now, it was a big deal. It was an extremely big deal. This is the definition of money laundering, and the way he was using it is the definition of embezzlement.
James answering live did not solve the story, but it changed where the focus had to go. After V1 stream, the issue was not just what each side claimed, it was what each side could actually prove. That leaves us with the questions DBDLeague still has not fully answered. So what is still unanswered? Not every claim in the story has been proven, but not every response fully answered the concern either. By this point, these are the questions DBDLeague still has to answer clearly. First, James's role. DBDLeague says he did not meaningfully help, but the record we have seen is more complicated than that. Mathis says James was introduced to staff and had calls with people inside the organization. James says he gave input, business advice, and planning help. So what evidence shows that he failed the role badly enough to justify how he was removed? Second, the contract. If DBDLeague leadership wrote or accepted the terms at the time, then the bad contract argument cannot stand on its own. Why were those terms accepted then and treated as James' fault later? Third, the tax and legal claim. DBDLeague accused James of giving advice that could have resulted in tax evasion or breaking federal law. This is a serious accusation. Where is the evidence showing the exact advice, who received it, and why would have it broken the law? Fourth, identity verification. If this was a genuine compliance blocker, when was it communicated? Where was it required? And why did it become central after the relationship had already broken down? Fifth, the money. This is bigger than James. DBDLeague was taking donations, running prize pools, discussing LAN events, and trying to become more official. So who controlled the money? What record exists and who can verify them? And finally, community safety. After allegations involving former leadership and younger community members, what safeguard exists now? Who handles the reports? How are younger players protected? And how does the organization make sure a first response is clear the first time? Those are the unresolved questions, and this is why I wanted to speak with Mathis directly. Not to treat him as the final answer to everything, but to understand what DBDLeague looked like from the inside. How much work people put into it, and why the collapse in trust hit so hard. My conversation with Mathis had something different from the public documents. Not because Mathis is neutral, he is not. He has his own history with DBDLeague, his own frustration, and his own perspective. But he was also not just some random person watching from the outside. He had been involved behind the scenes, and that makes his perspective useful for understanding how DBDLeague actually functioned. A lot of people knew Mathis as a caster, but in the interview he explained that his role went much further than that. He worked on production, he helped with structure, he worked on visuals, he helped shape parts of what viewers saw during Season 10.
I find it pretty funny when people ask or talk about DBDLeague, they always assumed, oh yeah, Mathis is that like one of their main caster guys. The guy that you kind of just hear commentate games, but I did quite a good amount behind the scenes that many people know of, but the broader community never saw any of it. I mean, you probably saw it in the interview that Dyer specifically doesn't really like giving credit. So yeah, I did much more than that.
And that part should not get lost. DBDLeague was not only a logo or response document or a few people at the top. A lot of what viewers saw was made by people giving their time, their art, their production work, their casting, their moderation, and their energy to the scene. Season 10 is the best example of that. Whatever you think about the leadership, the production clearly took a step forward. The visuals were stronger, the broadcast felt more serious, the matches felt bigger, And for a moment, it looked like DBD League was turning competitive DBD into something more polished and more visible. But that is also what makes the story frustrating. The problem was not that nobody cared. The problem was that a growing organization still seemed to depend too much on unclear leadership, private communication, personal relationships, and decisions that were not transparent enough for the size DBD League was trying to reach. When a small community project stays small, people can sometimes get away with informal systems, but once prize pools, sponsors, donation, land plans, staff work, player trust, and developer attention enter the picture, informal systems are not enough anymore. This should not turn into people harassing random DBD League staff members, casters, artists, match officials, or players. Many of them were not making the decisions being questioned here. Many of them were just trying to help the scene grow. The criticism belongs on leadership, transparency, safeguarding, communication, and accountability. Not on every person who ever helped run a match or make a broadcast look better.
But yeah, from
But
an outside
initially-
POV, it's fantastic. It's really cool what we were able to produce them, and I'm also very proud of the designs and yeah, the visuals overall.
I was going to say that initially, most of you seem to have gotten into this because of sheer passion, right? There wasn't, beside a few exceptions at this point, I want to say there was no monetary compensation for.
Yeah.
And if there was, it was not really high. So it was you guys were all driven by passion, dedication, and wanting to make something cool out of a game and that you enjoyed. This is what makes this story more complicated than one side being perfect and the other side being evil. DBD League created one of the most impressive moments competitive Dead by Daylight had seen. But the same organization also left behind serious questions about leadership, money, safety, and trust. And that brings us to the question this video has been building toward. Where does competitive DBD go from here? So where does competitive DBD go from here? The answer cannot just be move on, but it also cannot be burn everything down. Competitive DBD still has players who care. It still has casters, artists, staff, and viewers who care. It still has people who want tournament to exist, who want LANs to happen, and who want the scene to grow. But growth without structure does not work. Players should not have to wonder whether prize pools are being handled properly. Staff should not have to wonder whether leadership will communicate clearly. Younger community members should not have to wonder whether there are real safeguards in place. And viewers should not have to rely on leaked documents and live streams interviews to understand what happened inside an organization asking for their support. If DBD League or any future competitive DBD organization wants to be taken seriously, then the structure has to match the ambition. Clear leadership, clear financial records, clear safeguarding standards, clear communication, real accountability, not just when things are going well, especially when things go wrong. This was never just about who made the better Google Doc. It was about what happens when a community project becomes big enough to ask for trust, money, time, legitimacy, and attention, but not transparent enough to keep that trust when serious questions appear. DBD League showed what competitive Dead by Daylight could look like when people believed in it. Better broadcasts, better prize pool, bigger matches, bigger expectations. But if the scene wants to keep that ambition, it has to learn from what happened here. Because competitive DBD does not just need bigger tournaments, it needs organizations that are ready for the responsibility that comes with them. So the question is not only what happened to DBD League, the question is what competitive DBD does next.